It's FYF Sportsman. It's Lamont. We are back with another podcast episode. And today we got some more news out of Cleveland for you guys on the Deshaun Watson case. And so an insider has spilled the beans on what the possible punishment for Deshaun Watson will be. And it's going to upset a lot of people in mainstream media. We're going to be talking about it today here on FYF Sports. Before we get started, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to the video if you haven't done so already. Look, our coverage on the Deshaun Watson case as far as the feedback that we've received, I definitely appreciate all the engagement. Everybody's been chiming in. I think it's over 20K views. You guys have been letting us know your thoughts. And there have been a significant portion of you guys in the comments that are saying that it's just very strange how all of these accusations just started to appear out of the blue as soon as he requested a trade from the Texans. And I think, initially I was hesitant because I felt that angle was more of a conspiracy theory. But I think where there's smoke, there is fire. And as these cases are starting to fall apart, it looks like these accusations were quickly thrown together, not very critically thought out, very, very good attorneys on Deshaun Watson's side. They've done a good job of kind of picking the weeds out of this, exposing the lies. And again, were there some things revealed about his character that could potentially violate the NFL's conduct policy? Yes, he needs to have some accountability for his actions. He was definitely reckless and irresponsible. But was it worth the 1 year suspension that a lot of people in mainstream media were calling for? We're going to go ahead and get to a few more facts, and then we're going to touch on the actual information that was leaked out about his potential suspension. So again, there's been a 3-day disciplinary hearing to determine whether Watson violated the NFL's personal conduct policy. That this occurred in June, and a final decision on this status is expected by July 27th. Now, according to Sports Insider Tony Rizzo, and he's for ESPN Cleveland, he states that there is a very good chance Watson won't even end up missing half the season for the Cleveland Browns at this point. And as you guys can see right here, he states, as I heard from a reliable source, right now I'm hearing 4 to 6 games suspension for Deshaun Watson. So, if that is the expectation going forward in this case, then it makes sense why the Browns didn't care about what happened with Baker Mayfield. And that's something that I pointed out in the last video. I don't know if they would have been so quick to let him walk if they were predicting or expecting a lengthy suspension. So, again, now we understand why Cleveland's kind of been so laissez-faire with regards to quarterback play for next season. So, as for why Deshaun Watson's punishment will be so light, well, Tony Rizzo pointed out a few different things. He says it basically comes down to several factors. He said, first and foremost, Deshaun Watson did settle 20 of the 24 civil suits against him. And we talked about that as well. So 20 of those suits were settled. There were non-disclosure agreements that were signed. And then also there was an admission that nothing illicit happened as well that was signed as well. So essentially, those women, to take the settlement, they issued a final statement that indicated there was nothing illicit that went on. We're settling it and we're parting ways. And so that's one of the main reasons. It says, and again, there were a lot of ugly details that came out. But again, none of the more egregious details were ever proven in a court of law, civil or criminal. So I think that's a big point to focus on. And it says, also, when given the opportunity to indict Watson on criminal charges for his alleged actions, authorities declined. And remember, this is 2 grand juries in 2 separate counties, right? We can understand, okay, maybe 1 grand jury. But to fool two grand juries, I think that's extremely difficult to do. That's extremely difficult to do, especially since the preponderance of evidence for a grand jury is much lower to indict. They don't have to convict them right there. This is just to bring them up on charges. And two grand juries said there's not enough evidence here for us to move forward with criminal charges. So it's hard for the NFL to take a firm stance on this matter when nobody else seems to be taking it particularly seriously. The authorities don't take it seriously. They didn't find a lot of the women credible. They didn't find a lot of the allegations credible, and they didn't find a lot of the evidence that was presented to them extremely credible. Right? Remember, the authorities in one of the counties said that they were forced by higher ups or other politicians to push this case into the grand jury. There was a detective who stated, and he wanted to remain anonymous. He basically said, we didn't even want to send this to the grand jury. It was such a weak case. So now we have the example of Calvin Ridley. I know people have said this in the comments as well. They talked about Calvin Ridley getting suspended for an entire year for gambling. And you also have other players suspended for weed and different things like that. But in all of those cases, the primary difference in all of those cases is that the so-called crime was actually proven. What Calvin Ridley did was proven. And in this particular case with Deshaun Watson, it is just a bunch of accusations and settled civil cases. And again, those settled civil cases basically include final statements from all 20 of those women admitting or at least agreeing that nothing illicit happened. So again, once we as we say before, and I always try to stress this to people, look, the allegations made against Deshaun Watson are really kind of a tough pill to swallow, right? We understand that. There's no denying that, right? There were leaked personal DMs out there that were kind of humiliating for Deshaun Watson, and even for his family, right? And then these leaked DMs probably suggest that he has some odd type of deviant side of him in his personal life. But again, is that criminal? Right? Does it violate your personal moral code? Probably, or many other people's moral codes of conduct on how they carry themselves on a day-to-day basis? Probably so. But again, if it's not breaking the law, who are we to judge? And it says, so however, there has been some evidence, or actually in Deshaun Watson's case, there's been a lot of evidence that has helped him. So recently we talked about in the last video, it came out that a son admitted his mother lied about Watson. Right. Obviously, that's not fair. That's one thing that could undermine all of the accusations. Again, we talked about, remember when we did our live stream on this, when we pulled up some of the depositions, we talked about how a lot of the women's stories just sounded too similar. It sounded like they were coached into saying certain things. I just don't believe every single massage that Deshaun Watson had went exactly the same in all instances, and not just exactly the same. All of the women reacted exactly the same after the massage was over. Remember the consistent theme when we went over the depositions. They all left. They all cried. They all left. They all went over to a friend's house to tell them how horrible experience they had, and they all wanted to get out of the business of being a masseuse. So that was at least alleged. So again, a final decision on Watson is coming soon. And if his suspension is truly just 4 to 6 weeks, it will have massive ramifications for the NFL as a whole, good and bad. Obviously, there will be some pushback from mainstream media. We can already forecast and predict what media analysts like Molly Karam or Sarah Spain, we can already predict some of the things that they'll say, right? As in those cases, they were against Deshaun Watson from the jump. As soon as the allegations came out, I don't think there was a lot in mainstream media. They weren't willing to hear the case out. They weren't willing to weigh the evidence. They weren't willing to consider the legality or the criminal legality in it. How would the law handle these cases? And they still haven't taken recognition of that. And so the one thing if this turns out to be 4 to 6 games, this would be one of the few times where I would have to give Roger Goodell a round of applause on how he handled this. Right? He allowed an outside arbitrator to look at all the facts. He wanted to remove himself from it since it's such a high profile case. And I think he wanted to remove himself because he's had this stigma attached to him that he's been a stern disciplinarian and he's always sided with the public eye as opposed to the facts in a lot of cases. So I'm curious to see the media fallout on this because there will be a lot of media members catering to the feminist base who absolutely wanted to see him go down in flames over this, even though the accusations are getting proven false day in and day out. There's lies being exposed and, so many aspects of this case that are now sealed. A lot of the evidence that was used or presented to the grand jury is now sealed. Right? Why did the victims choose to have that information sealed and not released to the public? And I think we all know why, because it was more evidence that was more damning against them as opposed to trying to convince anyone that Deshaun Watson did something illegal or illicit. So as it stands right now, I know a lot of people were predicting a year, but it looks like Deshaun Watson will only face a 4 to 6 game suspension. If I had to take a guess, it's probably going to fall somewhere right in the middle of that. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's only 4 games either. I wouldn't be surprised because when you start to look at the facts of this case, there's just something not right about it. And from the depositions, from the testimonies, from the witnesses, remember, there were other masseuses, there were other women who didn't want to be a part of this, who said they absolutely never had any issues with Deshaun Watson, who also gave statements in his favor. And I think that's also not being placed into context with this. Now, again, over 66 massages in a 17-month period? Ridiculous, irresponsible, reckless. Does it violate the NFL's personal code of conduct policy? Yes, it does. And I think he will have to own that aspect of his suspension. Take it with a grain of salt. Get these cases, the remaining cases, settled. Right? I don't know right now. I think with the remaining cases, it's just about how long they're willing to hold out. Maybe they're trying to negotiate a bigger number. I just don't see them taking this all the way to trial, especially when they don't have pockets as deep as Deshaun Watson. The lawyer for the victims, I think he's going to be pushing his remaining clients to settle. I think that's going to be the best outcome for them. At least they can get something out of this, which is seemingly what they wanted dollars out of them. They can get some, maybe not as much as they would have hoped or expected, but they can get something, walk away. And again, all of the victims, we don't care who they are. Their names are not going to be scarred, right? Their backgrounds, they're not going to get doxxed. Half of the women we don't care about. I think right now, the only person who had a lot on the line, a lot to lose, was Deshaun Watson. And I think settling the remaining cases is probably the best course of action as we proceed. But if they want to take it to trial, I would love to see that as well, because then they would really have to worry about a lot of information that they don't want public coming to the public light. And I don't know how some of them could handle being exposed publicly for being prostitutes on Instagram. And in their Instagram accounts showing a history of dealing with multiple athletes and things of that nature, and doing the same types of massages for money. Are they willing to have the other athletes that they've dealt with come and testify? And so again, it can get messy for at least the victims here. I think they should settle. But you guys, let me know in the comments what you think about the 4 to 6 game suspension that's possibly coming. Again, I think that is completely fair. I think there is some accountability there that Deshaun Watson needs to accept and own. And 4 to 6 games sounds just about right. But it's FYF Sports, man. It's been another great podcast episode. You guys spam up the comments just like you did on that last video. Let me know your thoughts on this particular topic, because as the NFL season gets closer and closer, this case is going to be bigger and bigger. And there's going to be a lot of Cleveland Browns fans really watching the news ticker every day to see what the punishment is. And then we also have to keep in mind, if Roger Goodell is not in favor of the punishment, Roger Goodell can appeal this. So this could get messy if Roger Goodell is not in agreement with it. But from the way it sounds from Tony Rizzo, it seems like all parties from the NFL to Deshaun Watson's side are in alignment on that punishment aspect of it. And by the 27th, we should know something before the NFL season starts. But as FYF Sports, man, another great podcast episode. We will be back with more sports and news. Make sure you tune in, smash the like, hit the subscribe for more Deshaun Watson news. Whenever it drops, we will be there to cover it. We're going to have another live stream to cover this as well, because there were so many of you guys in the comments. I want to be able to bring you guys into the live panel so we can hear your voice. What are you hearing? If you're in the local Cleveland area, right? Have you heard anything about some of the accusers, right? You guys in the local area know more than us. So again, I want to hear from you guys on this particular topic as well. And again, it's FYF Sports, another great podcast episode. We will be back with more sports and news. But until then, it's FYF Sports, and we out.